Yeah, so as Paranita mentioned, I've chosen the sexy story of the case of dysentery from the Pali Canon. And it actually has been really wonderful to reflect on this story and Sangha commentary, actually. And I think it's really a story about what kindness is. And also, I really, of all the suttas and the experiences of the Buddha, like a real sense of what he was like in real life, if that makes sense. And I find that really, really inspiring. So I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'm going to pull out 2 reflections. So the story starts with the Buddha doing the rounds of the lodgings with Ananda, his good friend and attendant. And I was a bit intrigued about what doing the rounds meant. Basically, it's visiting the huts where communities of monks were living and just seeing how they were getting on. And Sangha says, they may have needed some encouragement, some teaching, or even a little ticking off, which I quite enjoyed. So on these rounds, the Buddha came across a monk that was in a really, really bad way. He was lying on the floor in his own excrement, unable to get up. So the Buddha came to the poorly monk and said, "Brother, what ails you?" He says, "I have dysentery, Lord. But is there anyone taking care of you, brother?" "No, Lord." "So why is it, brother, that the brethren do not take care of you?" the Buddha said. And he replied, "I am useless to the brethren, Lord. Therefore, the brethren do not care for me." So then the Buddha said to Ananda, "Go, you Ananda, and fetch water. We will wash this brother." "Yes, Lord," replied Ananda. So when he had fetched the water, the Buddha poured it out, and while Ananda washed the brother all over, the Buddha taking him by the head and the Venerable Ananda taking him by the feet, together they laid him on the bed. So they made the sick monk comfortable, and only then does the Buddha call the other monks together and question them. He said, "Brethren, is there in such and such a lodging a brother who is sick?" "There is, Lord." "And what ails that brother?" "Lord, that brother has dysentery." "But brethren, is there anyone taking care of him?" "No, Lord." And the Buddha asked, "Why not?" And he said, "Why do you not take care of him?" And they replied to the Buddha, "That brother is useless to the brethren, Lord. That is why the brethren do not take care of him." So then the Buddha says, "Brethren, ye have no mother and no father to take care of you. If ye will not take care of each other, who else, I ask, will do so? He who would wait on me, let him wait on the sick. If he have a teacher, let his teacher take care of him, so long as he is alive, and wait for his recovery. If no one take care of him, it shall be reckoned an offense." So yeah, it's a strong and simple story. And the key thing that really stands out to me is the Buddha's response to the poorly monk was just unconditional love and kindness, irrespective of who he was, the state he was in, and crucially, whether he was useful. So the first reflection after I have read this story again and again these last few weeks has been about you do not need to be useful to be loved. The Buddha saw him in his most vulnerable state, and his response was kindness and service. And Sangha says that to value people only when they are useful is not to see them as a person but as a thing, which is deeply unethical. So this brought me to my own reflections of when I first came to London Buddhist Centre about 14 years ago. And although I wasn't physically unwell, and actually I've been very lucky in my life that I haven't very often been physically unwell, but I've had quite a lot of mental unwellness. And when I first came to Buddhism, I was really quite depressed and anxious. And I didn't really speak to anyone for at least a year or so. I just came and was very quiet. And I remember being really accepted and welcomed as I was, mostly mute a lot of the time, sometimes quite grumpy. But that didn't seem to make me any less welcome. And it was just made a really massive difference to me to be who I was. And I was reflecting that, over time, broadly, I have felt increasingly more content, and especially after I moved to Sheffield about 10 years ago. But I still have had times where I've had some real episodes of deep depressions, where I haven't really felt able to be my sort of normal happy self, or a version that I thought people had identified as who I am. And I really felt that I should be okay, and that in some way, if I wasn't the happy self that they would expect now, that I'd either betrayed them or let them down. And I could feel quite a lot of shame. And I was really thinking about the monk. I was trying to imagine myself in different roles in this story. And I was really imagining for that monk that was so poorly to be in that state, seen by the Buddha, must have been like really quite a vulnerable thing. And it can often feel for me really hard to be seen when I'm feeling messy and not my best self. And I really remember vividly during one of those deep episodes of depression, it was suggested for me to call Dirigita, who I did know a bit, but I didn't know very well. And I remember calling her and sort of being in despair and crying. And she just said really kindly and really clearly, she said, "You are loved, even if you're a blob." And it was just exactly what I needed to hear. It was just really, really beautiful. And obviously it didn't fix everything straight away, but it really reminded me that I can and should reach out to the Sangha even when I'm messy, and that I still belong however I am. And I'm sure Dirigita wouldn't mind me mentioning that a little while ago she was struggling, and I was able to hug her and tell her that she was loved just as she was. So, we really are all in this together. And I just really love the phrase for myself and other people to just meet ourselves where we are, meet others where they are, and meet ourselves where we are. And Sangha Rachta said about friendship, it is the great benefit and blessing of being able to share our thoughts and feelings with another human being. It has been said that self-disclosure, the making of oneself known to another human being, being known by them, and knowing that you are known, is essential to human health and happiness. So if you are shut up in yourself without any possibility of communication with another person, you don't stay healthy or happy for long. So we do have to be seen and see others as we are, both in our glory and our messiness. And I just, it's just a really beautiful thing I took from this talk. So the second thing that I took from it, in some ways felt contradictory, but not, which was, you don't need to be useful to be loved, but if you can be useful, be useful. And it's not useful to be loved, it's not being useful to be loved, and it's not anything to do with our value, but we all have the potential to be of service to each other in just small, ordinary, beautiful ways. And, I don't mean necessarily grand gestures like, running marathons or leading retreats, as wonderful as they are, but, really simple, ordinary acts of kindness. I've really had to apply this to myself because I think I often need to be I've got a samskara about needing to be sort of special, and so my gestures needing to be special, and actually really focusing, particularly on things when people don't know that I'm doing it. And as part of this talk, I sort of was reflecting on these ordinary acts of service that have just meant so much to me. And loads came to mind, actually, was wonderful, but two in particular. And one, a few years ago, I was literally waiting for a cab to go visit my friend who was dying imminently. So I was in a massive state of despair. And my friend T at the time quietly went into my kitchen and found any ingredients that she could without being asked, and cooked them and made them into little packets for me for the journey. And it was just the greatest act of love. It was just what was needed at the time. And the other memory I had was a few years ago, I moved into quite a miserable bedsit. It was not a good time in my life, really. And Nagavadri came over and helped me build a futon. And again, it was just this ordinary helpfulness, doing it together. And it was just, it just those things stay in my heart. So yeah, I've really felt like these little acts of service that I've picked up over the years, that they're these jewels, really. So just to end with 45 seconds left. Just the key takeaways for this story really is that you don't need to be useful to be loved, but if you can help, do.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, this is my bit more. This is my first Sangha short talk, so I'm very nervous. you. So this evening, I'll be reading a story actually about the Buddha's encounter with a Naga in a fire chamber. And I'll read it directly from The Life of the Buddha by Bhikkhu Nana Moli. So why did I choose this story? When I was doing the introductory course a few years ago, I went on my first retreat halfway through the introductory course. So I went to Adhisthana for a young people's retreat, a sub-30s retreat. And I remember I was sat down in the shrine room, which was very unfamiliar and very new to me. I was sat down in the shrine room, and I sat down to do the mindfulness of breathing, which is being led. And as my mind was settling down, I started getting images coming up, which often happens when the thoughts are quieter, images show up for me. And I had this image that really struck me of this large black serpent with bright yellow eyes, and it was wriggling at me really fast in my visual field. And I was just like, whoa, what was that? And at this time, I didn't actually know what a Naga was, because I was only 5 weeks into the introductory course, so I had no idea. So that was my first encounter with the image of a Naga. And in recent times, the men in the men's community have heard this quite a lot. I've been regularly having dreams of serpents of different kinds, water serpents, pythons, small serpents, and they all want to cause me harm in one way or another, which has felt quite strange. And the people in my dream who I'm with often think that they're tame, and actually in one dream, someone I know was cuddling a large snake, and I was like, this is bizarre. But I'm always scared, and they're always there trying to harm me. So when I saw this story on the list of the stories of the Buddhist stories, I was very excited, and I thought I would tell it. And I've heard that the myth of the Naga often points to something in our depths. And Nagas are often described as serpents that dwell in the depths of large bodies of water, and they often are protecting a treasure. They go to the depths so that those who are not looking for the treasures cannot find them, but those who go down to the depths, they have a chance to find the treasures that the Nagas are protecting. And in other stories, they also protect the Buddha, like the story of Muchalinda when there was a storm. So now I'm going to read the story, and then I will reflect on it. So, the Blessed One journeyed on by stages till he at length arrived at Uruvela. Now, at the time, 3 matted hair ascetics were living at Uruvela, called Kashyapa of Uruvela, Kashyapa of the river, and Kashyapa of Gaya. Kashyapa of Uruvela was the leader, guide, chief, head, and principal of 500 matted hair ascetics. Kashyapa of the river of 300, and Kashyapa of Gaya of 200. The Blessed One went to the hermitage of Kashyapa of Uruvela and said, Kashyapa, if you have no objection, I should like to spend 1 night in your fire chamber. And Kashyapa responded, I have no objection, great monk, but there is a savage royal Naga serpent there. He has supernormal powers. He is venomous, fearfully poisonous, and capable of killing you. The Blessed One asked a second time and a third time and received the same reply. He said, perhaps he will not destroy me, Kashyapa, so grant me the fire chamber. Then stay there as long as you like, great monk, Kashyapa replied. So the Blessed One went into the fire chamber. He spread out on a rush mat and sat down, folding his legs crosswise, setting his body erect and establishing mindfulness in front of him. When the Naga saw the Blessed One come in, he was angry, and he produced smoke. Then the Blessed One thought, suppose I counter his fire by fire without injuring his outer skin, or inner skin, or flesh, or sinews, or bones, or marrow. He did so, and he produced smoke. Then the Naga, no longer restraining his fury, produced flames. The Blessed One entered upon the fire element and produced flames too. The fire chamber seemed to burn and blaze and glow with their flames. The matted hair ascetics gathered round, and they said, the great monk who is so beautiful is being destroyed by the Naga. When the night was over and the Blessed One had countered the Naga's fire by fire without injuring him, he put him in his bowl and showed him to Uruvela Kashyapa. This is your Naga, Kashyapa. His fire has been countered by fire. Then Uruvela Kashyapa thought, the great monk is very mighty and powerful, since he's able to counter fire by fire of the savage royal Naga serpent, with supernormal powers, who is venomous, fearfully poisonous, but he is not an arahant like me. Now, the last line is not really important, but I just found it interesting, and it was there. Okay, so going back to the retreat at Adhisthana. So I had quite short notice from the team on the intro course. I think it was about a week or two, and they were like, there's a retreat, do you want to come? And I went, yes, of course I want to come. And then I just quickly booked on the retreat. Up to this point, though, I had been experiencing different levels of social anxiety, which included actually coming on the intro course. It was really hard. And I used to come with a friend, and this sort of helped me calm down a bit. And it was so bad sometimes that actually going to the supermarket was fairly hard because of how anxious I would get. When I booked on the retreat, I'd forgotten about this anxiety, and I was just excited about going on a retreat. However, it occurred to me it had been a long time since I had spent a long amount of time with people I didn't actually know. So, yeah, and I'd never been on a retreat before, so I didn't actually know what was going to happen. And this just made the prapancha really strong. And as the retreat approached, I was like, oh, I don't actually want to go. I don't know what's going to be there, and I already get anxious. So this is not great. But there was something quite strong in me that I wanted to push through this anxiety that I'd sort of kind of accepted and often wouldn't do things because I'd be like, oh no, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm not going to do it. Unless I know someone there, I won't do it. And in this case, I didn't actually know anyone. Not completely true, because I then met someone there who I knew from Sheffield, but then, yeah, that sort of changed things. But yes, yeah, I was very anxious. And I decided that I was going to be courageous, even though this was going to be very difficult. And up to this point, my practice, I'd been meditating really regularly at that time, hence I was on the intro course as well. So my practice at the time kind of helped me sort of go on the retreat. And I tried to stay as grounded as possible, mostly by using the mindfulness of breathing. And I was aware of the stories I was telling myself, because these stories were fueling the anxiety. And they were increasing all the fear that I was feeling. But this is not how I wanted to live my life. The Dharma had showed me a way of living that I wanted, and this was a precious opportunity to push through the fear that lived within me. And then as the retreat went on, I realized I wanted to go deeper with my Dharma journey. And I had to overcome this fear and anxiety that existed within me. I sat with the fear and I sat with the anxiety during the weekend, and it was strong. I think sometimes I say it felt like I had taken some substance because I was so on edge for most of the weekend. But it sort of proved to me that actually I could do it, and anything in the future the anxiety just became smaller and smaller and smaller, like the fire-breathing Naga. I had sat with my Naga in a fire chamber. And 3 years later, here I am. I've been on several retreats. I don't count how many, too many to count. And I'm actually giving a talk in front of you, which is something big. So facing the Naga with the same energy it brought resulted in a wonderful gift. A gift that showed me I could overcome the fear within me. And I found a wonderful Sangha that I stand in front of today. And reading the story and reflecting on it has shown me that if we sit with our fire-breathing Naga, whatever it may be, it can help us overcome the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And just to say, if you're interested, it's a really nice story. And the Naga part is just one of the first wonders the Buddha does in Uruvela. And there are a lot more wonders in the story. So yeah, that is me for today.
Hey everyone. So I'm going to talk about the story of the Buddha meeting Sona. And any of you who have done an intro course here, which is probably most people, will be slightly familiar with this story. But I think it's both an introductory story, an introductory teaching, but also just a kind of Jedi teaching, which I think we'll spend our lifetimes trying to master. So I'll tell the story, and then actually following Anantakirti, I'll have two things to draw out from it as well. But yeah, so there was once a young man called Sona, the son of a nobleman. And the story is that he was so refined that he had hairs on the soles of his feet. And so King Bimbisara was so taken by this. He was partly interested in how refined Sona was, but he also just wanted to see the hairs on his soles of his feet. So he summoned him. So Sona came, but the problem is with a nobleman and also with the Buddha, you may know that we don't put our feet towards the Buddha because it's disrespectful. So Sona had to show the king the soles of his feet without being disrespectful. And so he found this way to kind of twist and do the feet. And the king was impressed. So he said to Sona, look, I've taught you all I can about managing the mundane life, but actually you must also be instructed in the spiritual life. So go to the Buddha as well. So Sona went to the Vulture's Peak and met the Buddha, and immediately saw there was something about this guy, and so asked to be admitted to the order, and then applied himself very diligently. So he was pacing up and down on with the hairs on the feet, and like trying, working out what the Buddha was saying. Until his feet actually started bleeding, and so there was a trail of blood, and the other monks were like, the Buddha needs to sort this out. This isn't quite right. So the Buddha came, and I'll read his words word for word. So he said, well, when you were alone in retreat just now, Sona, did you find yourself wondering if all the energy you were putting into your spiritual life was really getting you anywhere? Did you find yourself wondering whether or not you might actually be better off returning to lay life and using your family wealth to do some good in the world, and at least in that way making some merit? And Sona was taken aback. These were exactly the thoughts that had been going through his mind as he paced up and down. Were you not once a fine lute player, Sona? I was indeed, Lord. Tell me, when your lute strings were slack, did the instrument play and sound well? No, my lord. And when the lute strings were too tight, this one was so tight, it's actually snapped. Did the instrument play and sound well? Certainly not, Lord. This has gone slightly wrong. But when the lute string was well tuned, neither too slack or too tight, did the instrument play well and sound well? Sorry, microphone. Bing. Indeed it did, Lord. And just the same in the spiritual life, Sona. Too much of the wrong sort of energy leads to agitation and restlessness. Too little makes for slackness and dullness. You must look for evenness in your energy and balance in your spiritual faculties. You can use your experience as a musician to help you achieve this. And so Sona was really able to take this in. His feet were no longer cut and blistered, and he soon attained the wisdom of the enlightened ones, which is amazing. How do we do that? And so I've been pondering this for quite a few weeks now. And it's really hard, isn't it? Balance. And I thought, well, we use this in the intro course to talk about the middle way. So I was like, why is balance so hard? So I've been doing some research and found two things that I found helpful. So one of them is that actually, as humans, we're evolutionary, not wired for balance, which I kind of, although that in some ways you could think, oh, well, that's bad news. But actually, I kind of find that encouraging because it kind of validates the struggle of it, of trying to do this. So I was reading that actually in evolution, so being in a state, trying to survive more is safer. So that our ancestors who over-prepared survived. So no wonder sometimes we do this, we check our emails, we do, because that is kind of baked in to some degree. And then conversely, when the threat is gone, we are wired to conserve every single ounce of energy. And so that pulling back again is completely natural. So I kind of find that helpful when I'm feeling it's a struggle and is it only me? Well, clearly it's not. It's the whole human race. So, you know, when you're next struggling with the middle way, take solace in that. And another perspective I found really useful is somebody was saying that actually the word balance itself isn't completely helpful because balance does suggest this static place that you're going to arrive at where you're just like, but actually nothing is fixed. So actually we're not going to ever achieve that balance. Actually, that's not fully possible. We can have a much more balanced perspective, but if we're trying for balance, we may be setting ourselves up to fail slightly. And for me, I thought, oh yeah, because I think I can get in a pickle. And we can think about balance in terms of our life of practice and the bigger decisions we make, but then also moment to moment in a meditation session as well. And so how to apply this? And I've been trying to apply it in the last few weeks. My cat has been very ill, and balance has been hard. There's been grief, there's been fear. And so if I say to myself, okay, Moksadevi, what middle way, actually that's not that's not helpful. But what I can do is think, how can I be in a bit more balance right now? How can I try balancing? So it's not the noun, it's the verb. How can I be balancing? And then I can breathe, and I can feel a bigger perspective. For me, my cat, and actually I can really tap into the suffering of everyone. And then in that perspective, I'm just much more in line with reality. Things are pliable as well. I feel fluid, and I feel like I'm moving towards, as opposed to being stuck somewhere. So yes, I'd encourage you this week to, rather than thinking about trying to achieve this mythical balance, just think about how can you try balancing more in any moment. And so you can be like this beautiful middle lute string. Thank you.
Okay, so in a minute we'll go into groups. We've not got a specific kind of discussion point for the groups, but really just anything that's hit you from those talks. Absolutely gorgeous talks and really, really personal. I think really quite moving talks. So there might be something in those talks that really resonates. So do just talk about anything that's hit you from those talks. So the groups will be the newcomers in the green room, the women in the bookshop, the men in the red shrine room, and mixed groups upstairs, anyone that wants to stay in a mixed group. So we'll just thank the speakers again. Thank you ever so much, Georgia.